vibes are uncertain right now.
The vibes are uncertain.
I'm getting shades of Traylon early on with how I look at him right now, and so.
Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined live here in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl by producer JT. As always, JT, I know we're excited to be here. How was your first day?
If you can't tell, it was really sunny. So
half of our favorite Scarfaces, half that was in the sun today, a little red.
Like, Zach was the one who pointed it out first. Like, he was like, "Oh boy, no sunscreen. We're only looking one way." Like,
awesome
the entire time.
Tan I got going right on the side of my head. That's awesome.
We fell victim to some nasty sunburns.
It's January. Who's thinking about sunburns?
I'm not sure, man.
I don't know.
But either way, it got us. But it's good to be down here in Mobile, Alabama. I've never been.
Never been to Mobile?
I've never been to Alabama. So this is my first.
The whole state.
Yeah, this is my first time in the state. So
well, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, we, of course, are here at the Senior Bowl. The draft starts in Mobile, as they say, and we are starting our draft coverage really in earnest on this show. We've not really dove into, we try to keep it current on this show. We try not to get ahead of ourselves. So, during the season, we're talking football. In the playoffs, we're talking playoffs. And, we got the Super Bowl coming up here. We got a little 2-week break before the last game of the year, but this is the time where we start to dive into these prospects, dive into what the draft landscape looks like. And we like to try to take an approach to draft season that best reflects, I think, the average fan who's interested in the draft. I think this is the time, and y'all can correct me, those of you that are listening, if I'm wrong, but this feels like the time of year that a lot of fans start to actually become familiar with the draft class, familiar with the prospects, and get a feel for the landscape of what we're looking at in terms of the players available coming up in April. And so that's kind of what we're doing. And I know you and I have kind of approached it that way as well. We did our due diligence in terms of prep on the way down here, orienting ourselves with names and everything. But for the most part, this is our first real in-depth experience with a lot of these guys. And we're kind of learning along the way as well. And by the end of it, we become experts on the class. And so we can talk about it with great authority. But today, we're going to kind of keep it light, talk about the general vibe of the first two practices for the American and the national teams, some of the studs and duds from today. We're going to discuss some guys that really stood out, some guys that we were expecting to stand out and kind of didn't. Just one day of practice. I saw somebody tweet a minute ago, Bo Nix. Like, Bo Nix has played a whole decade of college football, but we need a couple more Senior Bowl practices to figure out if he's actually good at football. It's there's a little more to it than that, but it is nice. I think that I've had some folks earlier this week ask me, like, what's the point of the Senior Bowl along those lines of, like, we have tape to decide who is good and who is bad. Who has 3 good or bad days at the Senior Bowl doesn't necessarily dictate who's good and bad. True. Yes. It's not everything. But what the Senior Bowl allows us to do is take guys like that. One of the biggest stars of the day that we're going to discuss came from Toledo, some schools that you don't see them play against top caliber talent. This guy was a phenomenal tackle all year, but he played for Duke. There's nobody that could challenge him. Let's see him up against the best of his peers. And that's what this is. Unlike the Pro Bowl or the NBA All-Star game, this is an All-Star game where these guys they've got pads on. This is football practice. We're playing real football here. And so these guys are out here proving themselves in that way. And you get to see best on best and get kind of an even playing field for an idea of who's got the goods.
Yeah. And it's pretty interesting, the kind of mix of people that we have here, right? I know we were talking with a couple of our other buddies from around the Tennessee media space and talking about that. Yeah, while there isn't a lot of huge named prospects here, like I believe right now, currently, I think we counted there are 8 prospects in the consensus 32 that
top 32, right? First rounders
that are considered first rounders right now that are here. The draft is a lot about way more than that. And we're already learning very quickly that there are some really, really talented guys who can be found from that 2nd to 4th round
range. It's the meat of the draft.
It is.
Yeah,
it really
that's what the Senior Bowl is.
Where we're seeing that there's a lot of depth out there, which as a Titans fan may concern you with not having that 3rd round pick this year. But I'm sure we're going to talk about that a lot. But is a lot of good players out here that certainly are worth drafting.
So we're going to talk through some studs and duds of the day, keep it kind of light, get to some news. We're going to react to some of the news of the day in the Titan space and in the NFL space. And then we're going to get out of here. We'll have a show today, tomorrow, and Thursday, one for each day of practice while we're down here. Today, it's just JT and I. Tomorrow, we'll be joined in person here on the couch in our hotel room by our buddy James Foster, No Flags Film, friend of the show. He had a great time hanging out with him today, and we'll have him on the show tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we will have Zach and Stoney on the show. We'll have a 4-person panel discussing our closing thoughts on all things Senior Bowl practice. So, before we get into individuals today, what were some of your general takeaways from the practices, from the national team or the American team, maybe from the position groups, strengths and weaknesses, anything in general to take away from today?
Well, yeah, I think the one biggest thing today that we kept coming back to all day is that when they split this up, there really isn't a rhyme or reason to.
I have no idea how they pick what team.
But there is a very clear disparity in one position group between both teams, and that's at quarterback. The national team, I believe, that's the one that went first today.
Yeah,
correct? National team. Bo Nix.
Michael Penix, Sam Hartman,
pretty privileged Sam Hartman, Like they have these guys who were able to throw the ball and make some of these wide receivers show us what they have.
And then the best of the American team,
we
Bazooka Joe,
we have Joe Milton, Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler,
and then
I don't remember.
He's so bad I don't even know.
He's a Southern Alabama guy,
Southern Alabama quarterback whose name I'm so sorry is escaping me. But frankly,
about him,
you know what? Watching him out there today, he looked like he was happy to be here.
Yes,
and that's how it felt watching him. Is that guy better be happy to be here?
That's really how the biggest disparity I think between these. But getting back down to it, between the offensive lines of both teams, the wide receivers of both teams, there is a lot of good value there. So it was a good watch on both of these sides of the ball. So it made for a very entertaining day.
I agree, and I'm kind of going out of order here because
Carter Bradley there.
Carter, thank you, Carter Bradley. Yeah, stud out there, Jake. For those of you that are watching with us live, before we go any further, I got to ask a couple favors. If you could help us by retweeting or liking the show if you're watching on Twitter or on Facebook, and then leave Twitter or Facebook, head on over to Probably Sports Media on YouTube. Do us a favor and hit subscribe while you're there. But it's Probably Sports Media's YouTube page. You'll find this live stream, and in the comment section of this live stream, that's where you can be a part of today's conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts, like Logan and Jake and Joey and Marcus already in the comments. Appreciate you fellas being here with us. But yeah, if you could just hit subscribe, it's very helpful. We know that a lot of you guys watch and aren't subscribed. It's free to you. It costs you $0. It just costs you a click of the finger, and it is very helpful to us. So we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe for us. Thank you very much. We are also brought to you today, as we always are, by our wonderful and amazing sponsors over at BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse. We love being sponsored by BoomBozz, and we love BoomBozz, and we unfortunately are going to have to take the week off from our Thursday show. We'll be back next Thursday before the Super Bowl. Not to fret, but we'll tell you a little bit more about BoomBozz later in the show. In general, today for me, JT, the takeaway was, and you know, it's overwhelming a little bit. You get 2-hour practices with each team. There's a lot of names and faces out there. I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, that's who that guy is. Yeah, get oriented and everything. And you can't watch every position group. And so I know you spent a lot of time with wide receivers today. I spent a lot of time with quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. I spent some time watching the offensive line, but my game plan is essentially to spend more. I think you are as well. We're going to spend more time with the trenches tomorrow. So D-line, edge rushers, offensive line. And there's maybe the most interesting talent in terms of the Titans' future needs at those positions. So we'll be digging into that a little bit more tomorrow. Today, we're going to be focused on the DBs, the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks, and it's a pretty good crop of wide receivers down here. Some of the top 3 names in particular, not here, but you've got some really nice depth receivers and Xavier Leggett. I say depth in the draft, guys you can get on day 2. Xavier Leggett and Ladd McConkey and guys of that ilk. So Brendan Rice, those fellas are out here, and they looked pretty good today. We'll talk about them in some depth. The running back group, not the best. It's just a down year for running backs, which is fine. I was talking to our buddy James Foster. He said he thinks the first running back off the board might be like round 4, round 3. So it's just a down for year for running backs. Some interesting tight end prospects today that I didn't get a great chance to watch in depth, but talking to our buddy Stoney, who's here, he thinks that there's quite a bit at the tight end position to be interested about. And then the quarterback position, we already touched on that. So do you want to go ahead and just dive into some studs and duds from the day, some guys that stood out for us?
Yeah, I think, and they're obviously it's one day of practice, but there are guys who went out there today who exceeded our expectations or we didn't even know about and caught our eye and we said, ooh, this guy's bringing the juice today. And there were a couple of them. And then there's also guys that we had preconceived notions about coming into the day who we thought maybe would perform better than they did. And so when we say stud and dud, I think we have to contextualize it as stud
in
of
this
the day.
practice.
In this
Yes.
practice.
Yeah.
Who was a stud out there? And when we say dud, it doesn't mean we think that the player's bad.
We just expected more.
We expected more from them, and we're wanting to see more throughout the rest of the week. So this may all very much change, but these are our gut reactions from what we saw today.
Well said. And the first guy that you have to mention, the number one standout on either team on either side of the ball today was a guy that one of the few names that I knew pretty well coming in from a smaller school, but I hadn't watched his tape, didn't really know his game. So I was coming in cold, coming in unbiased. Quinyon Mitchell is the cornerback out of Toledo that I mentioned earlier in the show. He, to me, looked like the best defensive player on either team just at the Senior Bowl. Really, really nice day from him, particularly in the one-on-ones against the pretty good wide receiver group that the national team has. He was clamps all day long, and he got quite a few reps in there. He's not the biggest DB in the world, which I don't mind. He plays like he plays bigger than his size. I believe I checked his numbers earlier. I think he's 6 foot 195. Where he excels is on routes that are vertical. When the ball is headed downfield, and you've got to have matching speed, quick closing speed, get in and out of breaks quickly, flip your hips with fluidity. He's got all of that nails. He's fantastic when it comes to those longer developing, later breaking routes. Where you see some room for improvement is underneath, when the ball is thrown to the flat, or when it's a short in breaker or a quick out, and the wide receiver is doing a lot of fancy footwork and juking and cutting. He can get a little bit caught up, twisted, step on his own feet a little bit. Not super bad, but the couple of times he got beat, that was the kind of route that was being run. And I don't really mind that. I was talking with our buddy Sam Phelan from A to Z, who's down here as well. If you have to have a guy who's an elite press corner, cover corner, that can play outside, and his weakness is he might get beat underneath for 10 yards, as opposed to you're not worried about him getting beat deep. That's a big deal. And so, you can coach up a guy with footwork, with keeping your base low, keeping your center of gravity low. Quinyon Mitchell is a guy that I think absolutely should be on the radar of Titans fans, of anybody that's following this draft. He's currently on the consensus board, number 27 overall. So I think that his stock's going to only rise this week. I wouldn't imagine he gets out of the first round, but if he were to fall, he's somebody that if the Titans were, on the board at 41 or whatever, the second round pick, whatever they have.
I think they're 38, 39.
39. Okay. Yeah. It's the late 30s, and he's still there. He's somebody you got to take a hard and fast look at, because he's fantastic.
No, he plays with so much speed and aggressiveness out there. And I think it would be something that definitely, if the Titans were looking for that, like you said, it would take a massive falling off here, throughout the draft process, I think, for him to get out of that first round, because with the kind of cornerback and secondary talent, it's not as strong as it was last year.
Nope.
From one glance, it is not very much the same as last year. So you're going to have some guys who are going to rise up this board. And Quinyon Mitchell, just because he's from Toledo, this cat could have cooked anywhere that he went. This dude just plays with raw athletic ability.
So why Toledo? I don't. I wanted to ask him, brother, what were we doing at Toledo? Why? But
Yeah, but either way, he's a guy that I can't wait to continue watch. And he really is going to be a benchmark, I think, when we think about wide receivers for the rest of the week. If somebody can beat him, then I'm going to keep my eye definitely on one of those wide receivers who is able to beat this guy, because right now he was locked down.
We've not found one. Yes. Yeah, we've not found one. Who's a stud or a dud in your book?
Yeah, so I'm going to move over to the wide receiver position actually today and go with that first group. So the first group doesn't have a lot of guys who are really in the first to second round
Right.
conversation right now. You look at a lot of the guys who were in that round right there, or in that class right there, and the first one that comes off the board is Devontae Walker, and then you had other guys like Malachi Corley, Ricky Pearsall, Brendan Rice, Roman Wilson. I think a guy, and Jacob Counting as well. I think one of the guys who was really a standout today, who seems to have been falling for some reason before we even get into the draft process. Brendan Rice, man, was by far one of the top 2 wide receivers out there for this. I keep getting
national team. Yep.
He was a guy that when he started out a little slow, like it took him a couple steps, but man, once he started going, he was being physical. He was able to get a little bit of separation that people had questions about him coming into this. But he was a physical guy. He was playing hard the entire time, and he's got a really good range of motion and able to go up and get these balls that guys like Bo Nix or Michael Penix were throwing. Some of them, you could say Michael Penix was having a little bit of an off day with some of his throws today.
Not super accurate. No,
not super accurate, but Brendan Rice comes down with a lot of them that maybe he shouldn't have had. And I think we had this discussion with a lot of our friends here today. Brendan Rice, obviously, he is a nepo baby in some terms of the word. So
is Luke McCaffrey.
Yes,
so is
he's Jerry's son.
Jerry Rice's son.
Yeah,
yep.
So
Decent genetics. Decent genetics. Yeah.
But what have you done for me lately? And so when he was at USC, obviously with Caleb Williams, there wasn't really anything that he did that elevated him to be a factor, saying, oh, he's producing off of Caleb Williams. So
a lot of folks that know Brendan Rice's game, it's a product of I just saw him. He was there because I was watching Caleb.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But he came out today and played fast and physical, and I'm excited to see.
He plays big. He uses his. I mean, nobody drew more flags in one-on-one coverage today than he did. DBs felt they had to drape themselves on him and commit penalties to stay on him because he plays so big and fast and physical. I was impressed. He's one of the more polarizing guys in this wide receiver grouping right here and at the Senior Bowl. Just a microcosm of what I've been hearing on him. Today, when I was watching him in one-on-ones, I go to our buddy James, who he knows ball. He knows these guys already way better than I do yet. And I'm like, what do you think about Brendan? He's like, I like him. I think he's like, third round guy. I've got a pretty nice grade on him. I'm higher than most. Then I go to our buddy Teron Davenport, who also knows these guys and has been watching these guys. And I'm like, what do you think about Brendan? Like, what'd you think? I thought he looked pretty good today. And he's like, I'm not about Brendan today, man. Just in general, I'm not about Brendan Rice. And I'm not saying either one is wrong. It's just, I don't have I'm not going to plant my flag on either side of the line there because I don't have a super strong tape informed opinion yet. And that will come in the coming weeks and months. But man, the traits are there. The toolbox is there. It seems. It's just is he versatile enough? Is his route tree diverse? How far along is he as a developmental talent yet? That's kind of where I think folks are not crazy about him as a prospect, like you might think he is just watching him.
Yeah, and currently right now, I think the bottom line of him for the first day of the Senior Bowl here, currently he is the 90th consensus pick. He's 90th overall in the consensus draft, the big board.
And Jake points out, good point here from Jake. He clocked 23 mile per hour on GPS this season. He's 6'2", 212. That's scooting for a big fella. That's scooting.
And currently being the 90th, kind of in between these guys like Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall, where you aren't expecting a lot of talent, it looked like he was playing a lot better than where his current consensus was today.
Hey, speaking of Ricky Pearsall, tough day for Ricky. Big white fella from Florida. He's got some very famous catches on tape from this season. It's contested catch guy in a lot of ways, but he had a tough one out there today. And I'm giving him a hard time because, again, it's one practice, so we can relax. But today's practice, he was getting bodied out there for a bigger. I say bigger. He's not a huge receiver, but he's not a small, toolsy, gadgety guy. And he was getting bodied like one a little bit. And that was a little bit concerning to me. I never really saw him make a super positive play. I wasn't glued with my eyeballs to him all day long, but I was largely disappointed from what I saw in Pearsall.
Yeah, I think I might push back a little bit on that because I still think that he showed some things in his route running ability.
And you watched him closer than I did today, so
I can give you that one. That he was getting bodied around a lot because on his first 2 or 3 routes,
he's just getting run over.
He ends up on the ground,
and not illegally. Not like this is just losing foot. And I will say, I mean, we stepped on the field to talk to some players today. My number one takeaway is the turf. It sucks, brother. I'm trying to find a more political way to say it. It's a bad field. It's like concrete. It's like if your high school 7 years ago installed a turf field. It was the first one in the county, and it was like, oh my god, wow. But now it's 7 years later, and you're like, oh god, what have they not replaced this? It's one of the downtrodden Gen 1 turf fields. I don't know that for a fact, but that's how it felt. So if you're losing your footing a little bit, I'll give you some grace on that. Yes. But yeah, in general, I was not impressed.
When you have like the super fast, quick changing on a route guys like Luke McCaffrey and Lad McConkey out there, when you have them trying to make that turn on their route and they're slipping all over the place, but still trying to get up, I almost consider that this week a plus side, that they're able to make that quick turn and still not fall on the ground because of the conditions. But yeah, there were a couple times though where he ran some really fluid routes, and you saw the ability that he can have. And
Logan says Lucas Oil bad in terms of turf. Don't go crazy. Yeah. Don't go crazy. It's bad. Let's not get ridiculous.
But there is something there for him. I think the physicality is always going to be a problem with him, because that's where you start to question, okay, he has these moments where he's able to run a fluid route, but it's the NFL. You're going to get bodied basically almost every time on every play against some of these caliber cornerbacks. Can you stay a consistent weight and build that you are able to overcome that? And so I think that's one of the biggest questions we have for him. And that's why currently his draft stock is 9. It's actually 9 on the consensus board, 9 spots higher than a Brendan Rice, which I think is like the
81 overall,
81
90 overall,
versus a 90. If you want a guy who can still run those big long routes and be physical against a corner, like just take a Brendan Rice.
Right. Let me bring up 2 receivers real quick. One Logan mentioned a couple minutes ago, Johnny Wilson. And when I say receiver, that I'm using it in a very loose term. Johnny Wilson's a big fella. I mean, he's a mountain of a man. And you hear a lot of folks talking about like he needs to be converted to tight end. I can tell you right now, he's already close to one in terms of size. He's got a frame on him that you could easily put on 20, 30, 40 pounds of muscle. And you could make this fella big and hard to move. And he's got really nice hands. I mean, listen, can you pull up his measurements real quick while I vamp on him? The feeling that I got seeing Johnny Wilson in person for the first time today, Johnny Wilson, receiver out of Florida State, for those that don't know. We need to keep approaching this like folks don't know. We're learning as we go here. We're learning as we go. The feeling I got seeing him in person for the first time was the same feeling I got last year seeing Darnell Washington in the tight ends group at the combine for the first time, where you're just like, one of these things is not like the others. You walked over to me and his team had just run out there, the American team. And I said, hey, without knowing what number he is, can you spot Johnny Wilson? And you immediately, it's just the guy who's a head taller than everybody else and thicker than everybody else and stronger than everybody else. He's so big. I don't know what else there is in terms of takeaway. He had a fine day. He looked fine out there.
The problem is
it's just big. That's the thing. Big.
Where we start to get into the conversation of, well, could Johnny Wilson or any of those guys have done more if Joe Milton or Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler wasn't the one throwing the ball?
Yeah. Feels like it.
It's a little bit of the trap that we got into last year when I was talking to you about this when we went to the combine. We were maybe a little lower on these receivers because Max Duggan
is throwing balls to Tank Dell, and it's like, oh, Tank Dell sucks. Oh, maybe it's Max Duggan. Yeah. Maybe it's Max.
But yeah, like you said, he is 6'7", 237 according to PFF. Now that's what they have on there. I know the Senior Bowl, and I'll have to go find those. But either way, big dude, like 6'7", 6'6", doesn't matter. The fact that he is like that big, like that, right, and he is able to still make some of these catches and some of these plays out there. He's a dude that I think really could have some great potential out there in this draft class. Now, he's not going to be a fluid route runner. Like, it's just not possible. But if you want a guy who's probably going to be bigger and maybe even faster than most of the guys out there, like Johnny Wilson.
That's like asking for fluidity from a rock slide. Yes. It's not in its nature. That's not what you're looking for.
Yes.
Devontae Walker, wide receiver out of North Carolina, 51st on the consensus board, 51 overall. One of the higher, the upper crust of receivers that are here this week. are right in that meat of the second round projection right now on the consensus board. You got Xavier Leggett, who we'll talk about in a minute, from South Carolina at 44, Ladd McConkey from Georgia at 50, and Tez Walker at 51. And so he's in that upper crust, and I was really disappointed by him today. We got Zebra Technologies down here tracking everybody, and so they're constantly showing like the fastest guys on the day up on the big screen, which is nice. And he clocked the fastest speed today at practice at 21 and change miles per hour. I can't really say anything super nice about him besides that. A lot of drops, some poor route running. I want to circle back on him tomorrow to see just like, and again, it's, did you have a bad banana at breakfast? You know, did you not sleep well last night? Like, you don't know with one practice. But what he showed today was kind of concerning.
Yeah, he probably biggest bust of the day for me, just considering right now where
expectations versus reality
is right now. He's currently on the consensus big board, 51 overall, with some mocks even putting him as like the first pick of the second round right now.
Yeah.
He's a guy out there that I think when you compare him to a Brendan Rice or a Roman Wilson out there, easily was the third best receiver out there in terms of those two. And I think even if you talk about a guy like Malachi Corley, who we'll probably touch on later this week if he continues to do what he's doing, right? That he's a guy who even outperformed Devontae today. He was a guy who's all over the place, I think, just from where his body position was on a lot of his routes today. Was having a lot of trouble getting separation and just like lacked a lot of the elements that had made him good in the past with what he's done this season. So yeah, definitely a guy that we need to circle back on. And like you said, it's tough to just go see this, right? And say, oh, this player can't succeed. It's not what we're saying. It's just when you put him in this situation right now, it's a little concerning.
Let's wrap it up on receivers here. A couple more guys. Let's talk about Leggett and McConkey, the other two guys on that upper crust of projected second round receivers. I was impressed by McConkey for sure today. He was as advertised. He wasn't the biggest standout for me today, but that's partially a byproduct of my expectations for him coming in being very high, and he met them. He absolutely met them. The route running is as advertised. You've got guys out there looking goofy in the secondary, trying to keep up with his footwork, with his crisp route running, with his ability to shake guys. I think I've said this on the show before. If I've not, let me put it out there. I would be a huge Ladd McConkey fan already, having not even watched a ton of his tape yet, but just watching the games and knowing what I know about him and how scouts perceive him. If you told me he could stay healthy for 75% of his rookie contract, playing 75% of those games, I'm in. I just worry that he's going to be like a much better Kyle Phillips. And it's like, man, the practice, he looks awesome. And when he's out there in bursts, he looks awesome on the field, but he's just constantly dealing with a hamstring here and a meniscus there and an ankle. Like in college, he dealt with quite a bit of injury concerns, and that's the number one thing on him that we're going to be talking about pretty much all draft season.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it was he is like a beefier like Kyle Phillips in that way. Like he is the guy who's going to return punts. He's almost specifically in the punt return.
When
he was in the slot today, that was something that like really stood out, that this is a guy who is Kyle Phillips, but that's the
better.
That's the risky run with a guy like that. I will say he is the most fluid route runner out there today. I think in a quarterback class where
maybe we should use Kyle, maybe like Cole Beasley,
sort of thing. In a quarterback class today where they weren't really putting the ball downfield because they just didn't have a good feel for it.
Right.
They were obviously looking to Ladd a lot because he was able to get separation on those short in-breaking routes and out-breaking routes. Like he's a guy that like the most common place where he's currently slated to be drafted is New England. And I think that's almost poetic and perfect in a certain way, but that's the kind of player he is.
A couple of guys in recent New England history that fit that profile. Yep. Little Julian Edelman part deux situation, perhaps. The other guy is Xavier Leggett, who I think we've settled. We don't know if it's Leggett or Leggett. I've heard people that I trust to know these things say Leggett, so I think it's Leggett. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but like I heard Nate Tice and Dane Brugler both say Leggett, So I'm guessing they're right, but maybe they're not. I don't know. Xavier Leggett from South Carolina, wide receiver, the highest projected guy to go in this class that is currently at the Senior Bowl. Oh, and look at this. Jake Robertson said Bucky Brooks' comp for Loud McConkey today is Kyle Phillips. So see, we're not far off at all. Thank you, Jacob or Jake. So Leggett, you have to parse it by saying he's in the group of bad quarterbacks, and there's some concern there.
The group of bad quarterbacks who also includes the quarterback that has been with him for the past 2 years.
Thank you. Well. Yes, the guy that he knows. Help me out. What Spencer Rattler. A lot of names today. Huh? My brain's soup at this point. That being said, he was like, what's the line from Uncle Drew where it was like $1 million move, 5-cent finish kind of deal? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how Leggett looked to me today. Off the line, the burst, the acceleration, the first cut, the first step. Liked it a lot. I mean, a lot. And our buddy TD keeps comparing his movement ability, the way he looks out there playing the position, to AJ Brown. I agree. It looks reminiscent of that. He runs similarly. He's got a similar intensity to him. That the rest of it, like, we're not saying the comp is his greatness or his potential or any of that. Just the way that he moves, it looks a lot like that. And he's got a body type that's relatively similar as well. The difference is, whereas AJ Brown is one of the best finishers at the catch point and separation and downfield and good hand, like all these, like Leggett today, when he got opportunities, he wasn't making the most of them. When the ball came his way, that 5-cent finish was really throwing me off. What did you think about him when you watched?
Yeah, so Leggett is one of those guys that I really wanted to dive into this week, and that's probably one of the guys I will be paying the most attention to, just because I believe that if the Titans were to draft an offensive tackle with their first pick,
right?
That Leggett is a guy that they would maybe look to target with that second round pick.
And he's right in that range where they're going to be picking.
Yeah,
yep.
The
AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Leggett, right, McConkey, that's the range.
He's a guy that it's kind of been up and down already and just a little uncertain this past 2 days. Of course, you have to look at his measurements yesterday. Most measurements, if you looked at the past year, have been putting him at 6'3", 227. He comes in at 6'1" yesterday.
Can we talk about that? I do not understand why colleges insist on artificially juicing numbers when we know that if they're good enough to play in the league, we're gonna find out the real number. You're just making them look bad for no reason.
Yeah.
So why say a guy's 6'3" when he's super not 6'3"? 2 inches shorter than that. Just like, you can be 6'1" and be a good receiver. It's okay. It's really okay.
To be fair,
I don't get it.
At the same time, though, when you compared him to a Johnny Wilson, like he was in there with Johnny Wilson, it wasn't too far off though. Like he was the second tallest guy out there.
He wasn't short. No.
It's not something that I think
it's just stupid
knocking him down a peg for. It's just something that you come into the week and you're a little surprised by that. Now with what his play today, I will agree with you. The burst and what he looked like out there was good. Like I that was all as advertised. But the things I think people have problems with in his game is the catch point and being able to bring in the ball, and then also just being able to be a playmaker in yards after the catch. And so when you see that today, where the really only play that I really had a problem with, there was one where he was going out to the sideline and just missed the ball, went straight through his hands, and that one was tough. But then on the next play, literally the next play, he was a guy that he didn't bring it in bounds, but he made a pretty impressive catch on the outside there, where he was just getting pushed out of bounds anyways. However, it's just things. The vibes are uncertain right now.
The vibes are uncertain.
I'm getting shades of Treylon early on with how I look at him right now, and so I'm hoping to see more from him as we continue in the draft process.
Anybody else on the receiving end of things that you'd like to mention from today?
Yeah, we can talk.
I have a couple DBs I want to mention, and then we can be done.
Jake Robertson here in the chat said Jacob Cowling was disappointing. I would agree with that. Today did not have the best day, but we'll have to see more of him tomorrow. Roman Wilson also is a guy that I think not really being talked about because he just truly was solid today. Like there really was no notes.
Fine day for him.
But yeah, and then outside of that, like you said, the other couple positions out there today, running back and
McCaffrey. We didn't mention Luke McCaffrey. Speaking of decent genetics,
yes.
Speaking of Nepo babies out here at the Senior Bowl, Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's younger brother, wide receiver from Rice. Further on down the depth chart, 169 overall on the consensus board right now. But I thought he had a pretty nice day, made some nice catches. He's a guy that is going to operate in that short and intermediate area. He's going to have, he's built like his brother, but he's longer and not as thick. Running back, wide receiver difference there. It's like if you stretched out like Christian and made him into a wide receiver essentially. But I thought he had a pretty nice day as well. Yeah, made some catches that caught my eye. Yeah,
there were a couple things that surprised me with him, but still there were some times where I thought that a lot of cornerbacks were getting the best of him today, and I think that's an issue when you are supposed
the physicality is good, not great.
Yeah, when you need to be a fluid route runner like that, I was a little disappointed like that. Outside of wide receivers today, there was just another guy who I'm going to keep my eye on the rest of the week. That's running back Marshawn Lloyd from USC.
Okay.
Was a guy in the first round of the practice where I thought if there was a running back there today that caught my eye and was able to actually show something, I thought he did. He was both able to do it in the receiving game and in the running game. I thought he was explosive. I thought he was feisty. So he's a guy I definitely want to keep my eye on as we go throughout the rest of the draft process.
Okay, a couple of DBs I would be remiss without mentioning that caught my eye today. One is Chris Abrams-Drain, cornerback out of Missouri, 77th overall on the consensus board. Chris Abrams-Drain had some really, really nice the national team went first today, and there were a lot of players caught our eyes. I think we all agreed that the American team, the practice was just like, it's kind of meh, kind of blah, not a whole lot of excitement, not a whole lot of individuals that made plays that really caught your eye. At least, not, again, parsing out there. I think there was a lot of trench play in the second group that we're going to have to watch tomorrow that we didn't spend a ton of time watching. But Chris Abrams-Drain was one of the few guys in that second practice with the American team that really stood out to me. He's a really fantastic cover corner out of Missouri. I really don't have a whole lot of insight into him as a player yet. He's somebody that is earmarked now for me absolutely to pay attention to down the stretch. And then the other guy is Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, safety out of Auburn. Was playing some cornerback today as well as safety, but played safety in college. He is currently, let's see.
He's 157.
157 overall. Okay. And is he listed as a safety on here? Or is he listed as a corner?
He's listed as a corner.
Okay. So interesting. So the consensus board lists him as a corner. I was led to believe, I believe he played technically safety at Auburn. I spoke to somebody that covers Auburn, so I'm assuming they're right. Either way, a DB out of Auburn, versatile in that way, made some really nice plays today. Those are two that I have earmarked to pay attention to as potential later round pickups for the Titans, where they do need help in the defensive back department. And that's Chris Abrams-Drain and Jalen Simpson. Both of those guys stood out for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on Jalen Simpson. He was a guy, because honestly, as you said, the second portion where the American team was practicing was less than favorable, especially.
Right.
But it took us a while. But I think for you, myself, Nick Suss, the Tennessean, who else was with us? I think James was also with us.
Sam Phelan.
Yep. He was a guy that everybody said, "Oh, wait a minute.
Pay attention.
We might have a guy here." So that was someone who we thought was very interesting today.
All right. So again, we didn't not a ton of detail on individuals today. Just some of the dozen or so that really stood out to us. We'll have James on the show tomorrow. He'll have a lot of insight on these guys, and then we'll end the week with a full blown panel of JT and I with Stoney and Zach. We've got some news to dive into today. 3 news items that JT, I know you've got prepped for us. So let's dive into that before we get out of here.
Yeah. So let's start off with the first one that is Titans centric. It was reported by Ian Rappaport earlier today that the Titans, as they continue to release and let go of a lot of the old staff and let Brian Callahan decide what he wants, the Titans are releasing Pat O'Hara, the passing game analyst. He was a guy who was the quarterback's coach when Ryan Tannehill was predominantly the starter. Before Charles London came in, he moved to passing game analyst. Now he's no longer with the team. Just kind of goes to show that Brian Callahan and his staff are moving in a different direction. I think philosophically with what they
their
want,
top end
Levis,
quarterback, wide receiver, passing game. The passing game is going to be different.
Yes, and so that we'll probably continue to see more of these. I think there's something to be said though about today, Coach T, Terrell Williams, still rocking the Titans sweatshirt out there, still proudly
Head coach of the American
head
team.
coach of the
Terrell
American
Williams,
team, still having that. And so he's a guy like as we've heard about this week with Shane Bowen potentially still being the defensive coordinator. It sounds like that side of the ball, you might see a lot more guys still retain on staff. And so Terrell Williams continues to wear the Titan stuff. And that was an interesting note, I thought.
Yeah, Pat O'Hara being released, bad for Pat. Obviously, not good for the team, I would say. I think it's time to cut bait. If you're going to go all in on changing, go all in on changing, and that's what that involves.
Let's talk about a former Titans offensive personnel guy that got a new job as well today. Arthur Smith.
Former Titan, current Yinzer, future Yinzer.
Future Yinzer. He is coming into the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to be their offensive coordinator for the foreseeable future. We were talking about this. Now, most likely we'll see Jaylen Warren not be utilized correctly or something like that. But we'll see how Art Smith can turn around Kenny Pickett.
Do you think
those quarterbacks?
You think Johnny Smith's opened the Zillow app yet to see where he's going to live in Pittsburgh?
That's a great question.
Yeah, no, listen. Art Smith, tough situation as a head coach. Totally. Yep. Can't do it. Right to fire him as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. However, I still think that he can coordinate an offense. And I think that for the Steelers situation in particular, I really like this hire. I do. They feel as a team, they need to get back to some Steeler football. They're bringing in the best coordinator option on the market in terms of establishing a solid run game. He's going to do that. He's going to get that nice run blocking offensive line with a nice stable of running backs and a run scheme situated. I think that that's going to be helpful. The quarterback situation, I have like Ryan Tannehill to Pittsburgh. Sure. I don't know. Folks are like saying, no, you can't. Okay, fine. Who do you want to rock out with? Kenny Pickett? Be my guest, man. You want to rock out with not Duck Hodgson, former. That's the caliber. That's the caliber of player we're talking about here. Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky. Sure, go for it. I don't know what he's going to do in that department. Poor guy went from Ryan Tannehill being the best guy he's ever coached at quarterback in Tennessee in his prime, and then it was Desmond Ridder, and now the Pittsburgh Steelers situation. I don't know what he's going to do in the quarterback department. I don't know what they're going to do in the quarterback department, but I think in general, for needing some fresh blood and changing the offense and getting back to the Pittsburgh Steeler way a little bit, I think it's a good hire for them.
Yeah, I mean, they could even think about bringing in now Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew to be the quarterback.
Good Lord. Don't ever cite Pro Bowls as a meaningful stat ever again. Do yourself a favor. No, not you, just in general. I'm speaking to the public. Don't ever, just do yourself a favor. Don't ever talk about that ever again.
Finally, the last bit of news for today. Ben Johnson will be staying with the Detroit Lions as he declines to continue being in the search for the
Commanders in Seattle. Both of them said, thanks.
Little interesting the way it went.
What's going on, man?
Apparently the Commanders brass found out that Ben Johnson no longer wanted to be considered for the job while they were en route to interview him.
In the air, in the plane.
It's so interesting.
Does he not want a job? Here's just two thoughts. One, folks are saying, well, he's betting on himself. He's waiting for the right position. Cool, fine. If you're looking for an attractive job opening, it's Washington. They've got a new ownership group. Vibes are high. They've got an established offense set up, ready for it. The stud quarterback that they're going to draft at number 2 overall in this draft class. They're building a new stadium. They've got a new GM in Adam Peters from San Francisco, who's I think going to be really, really good at what he does. It was such an attractive rebuild situation. I can't think of a rebuild situation like that has been more attractive in the past. And then if you want an established situation, Seattle Seahawks are already they're put together to win games now. So I don't know if he's waiting for Andy Reid to retire. I don't know if he's waiting for the Cowboys to fire McCarthy. I don't know what he's waiting for. Maybe he's just, maybe he's just a family man that says, I'm rich and I'm happy to do what I'm doing here. And if you really want me to come do your thing, you got to, here's my number, 16 million a year, whatever it is. I heard some folks talking about that number scared off some teams. It shouldn't. You're an owner. You have infinite money. The job is to get the guy. It's such a stupid and foolish reason not to hire a guy if you're an owner because they're asking for too much money. The job is to find the guy. You have infinite money. It does not impact you in any negative way in terms of like a cap or anything. For you can pay your you can pay your coach $50 million a year. Nobody cares. If you get the guy, you get the guy. That's what matters. And I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. But that'll be an interesting one as it continues to unfold. But that's going to do it for our news segment today.
All right, that's going to do it for our show today. Appreciate everybody that tuned in with us live. Thanks so much. Like we said, we'll be live here again tomorrow afternoon around the same time with James Foster from A to Z Film Room and No Flags Film. And then on Thursday with Zach and Stoney from 440 and Sobros Network and Stacking the Inbox, all of that good stuff. We'll be hanging out with them, wrapping up the Senior Bowl practices and talking about these prospects. Until then, thank you so much for listening live. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're not, make sure you're following us at Hot Read Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. Until tomorrow afternoon, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you then.